Here in Kampala, you have been hit by a terrorist bomb. We were hit in Nairobi, 1998. So instead of having the world reaping the peace dividend, as we like to call it, the result has been hot wars. And that's a subject that I want to commend to the serious academicians of Makerere University. What actually went wrong? So that today we have a religious extremism of the type never before witnessed in history. And yet, the competition was between capitalism and communism as we knew it. Ladies and gentlemen, what then do we learn from all this? That we can isolate valuable lessons from our own past that confirm to us that our approach to development suffered systematic weakness and failures. These weaknesses and failures do create conditions for individual agencies and actors to rethink past events and voluntarily resort to convenient options that the future demands. Fortunately, East Africans have learned these lessons and have initiated measures to fix these problems the best way we understand them. The mitigation and interventions to these challenges have been conceived and addressed mainly through political reforms, especially underscored by the rewriting of our constitutions. And in this regard, as I just mentioned before, Uganda wrote a new constitution in 1995. Tanzania made some 14 major amendments, and I think they're still thinking about a new constitution as well. While in Kenya, we really went absolutely green, and the Greens, who are the yes, won against the no's. So now we have a new constitution in Kenya. With these changes, democracy and respect for human rights, including competitive elections, are truly on the rebound. Pressure for integrity in public service, and also for the establishment of agencies to deliver desired results is insurmountable. Therefore, today, the conversation is less about whether or not democracy and respect for individual freedoms is to be fought for than how these values and practices may be consolidated. And on this score, East African countries deserve an equivocal acclamation. The people of East Africa waged independence struggles and economic, what I would call exploitation, and we won. The struggle against colonialism and the enlightenment that came with that struggle invariably exposed the African to what translated to modern lifestyles. Underwriting such modern living were such imperatives of Western education as healthcare, as housing, transportation, and communication, as well as food and nutrition. To that list, add clean drinking water, and if you like, because Ugandans are very smart people, smart attire. The dilemma is that colonialism had not created conditions for Africans to access such high standards of living. Therefore, a hiatus existed between knowledge of how better life could be expressed in an atmosphere mired in want and in despair. The desire to bridge this gap partly spurred the independence movement and the struggle that we all won. Noting the then existing dissonance in education, devoid of organic synthesis, national leaders of the time identified the missing link and were quick to identify the primary goals of the new governments at the incubation phase. Top among these goals focused on elimination of illiteracy, disease, and poverty. And now we added to that the issue of bad governance eventually. And I think we have overcome, particularly the last one. These leaders laudably went further and developed master plans for the social and economic transformation of their countries. So central were these master plans that they have become classical reference material and indeed primers for scholars, policymakers, and development practitioners to this day. They are, I want to mention, sessional paper number 10 of Kenya of 1965 on African socialism and its application to planning in Kenya, Uganda's Common Man's Charter, and Tanzania's Arusha Declaration. My intention, ladies and gentlemen, is not to revisit the debates on these development blueprints. Rather, I propose that our current crop of leaders acquaint themselves thoroughly with the development prototypes evolved soon after the attainment of independence, These blueprints are possessed of deep policy and ideological imperatives and insights that greatly impacted development in East Africa in the immediate post-independence era. In these documents, notable attempts to address some very pertinent concerns about how best to mobilize capital, harness natural resources for increased investment, organize production, and prompt the expansion of the economy were made. They attempted to answer pertinent questions about what resources would be needed, the source of such resources, and the agencies suitable for the management of investment, be it by governments, by private citizens, by cooperatives, or indeed by foreigners. In the same vein, East Africa's pioneer development archetypes sought to identify what the relative significance of agriculture, commerce, and manufacturing were at that point in history, and exactly how the benefits of investments accruing from such investments could be equitably shared across social groups. The appropriate role of the government within that framework was also defined. The national leaders of the time therefore deserve commendation for the questions and concerns they raised at the early stage of our independence. And those questions still remain relevant. Nevertheless, the post-independence period witnessed some very positive gains against major socio-economic political indicators, notably in the sphere of education and literacy. We had yesterday, for instance, the literacy rate in Uganda is up to 73%. And when NRM took over in 1986, that it was at 50%, now commendably at 76, 73%. Nevertheless, the externally driven policy shift from a government-driven development framework to one that ceded control and direction to the private sector, the structural adjustment program intended to revitalize African economies and spur growth seems to have caused some difficulties, especially in the fight against poverty. And for poverty, ladies and gentlemen, is a prime theme of presentation before you this afternoon. Privatization, cost-sharing, liberalization, decontrol, and deregulation of all seem to have had a severe backlash, at least in the immediate term. We also remember we witnessed price increases, higher interest rates. Of course, that is also now, unfortunately, the issue, thanks to external factors that we are all witnessing. And so that list was growing, and it was very worrying. We await the promised long-term gains under what were then called SAPs, Structural Adjustment Programs. That model clearly failed. And I want to say that it does deserve reprimanding because it brought with it a lot of suffering and stagnation, not just in East Africa, but in the larger African continent. The program could receive more reprimand than acclamation. But now we have formulated, have we not, models, Kenya Vision 2030. Rwanda have come up with Vision 2020. And I think that by these models we are saying we want our citizens in East Africa to enjoy a very high quality of life and be able to reach the middle income status. We are saying that the 21st century, and I believe this to be true, truly belongs to Africa. These vision documents intend to spark growth through expedited investment and infrastructural development. In fact, I could go on and say vijiji vya ujamaa model is even relevant today. It is a model that we can apply to promote planned urbanization as opposed to subdividing land holdings that we have in East Africa. Particularly, this is a big problem in Kenya, where a father begins with 100 acres and as he bequeaths this to future generations. That if you follow the example of Ujamaa, where people would live in the villages and convert whole areas for agricultural purposes, then you find, as I say, I find that model of Ujamaa absolutely attractive. It is a model